There's still no news of a special session for Minnesota lawmakers. In May, the legislature ran out of time to finish a transportation funding package and a borrowing bill for construction projects. While lawmakers did pass a tax bill, Governor Dayton vetoed it over a language error that could have had expensive consequences. The governor has been promoting the need for a special session, but says he won't call one until lawmakers agree to his demands. Joining me now to talk about the likelihood of that happening is Republican Speaker of the House, Kurt Daudt. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Marianne.
Good morning. So you met with the governor on Wednesday. What happened?
Well, we had a good conversation. I think we're not making a huge amount of progress at the current time, but I think we're understanding where the pitfalls might be on both sides, and hopefully that will, as we continue to talk, that'll bring us a little closer together. What we're hearing from Minnesotans is they'd like these two bills passed. The tax bill was a bill that would have provided about $550 million of ongoing tax relief. We think that was a really good bill, and it would have helped a lot of Minnesotans with some needed tax relief. And the bonding bill had about $700 million of road and bridge money in it. So we think that that's really important, and it was specifically targeted at very high-profile, regionally important projects that people have talked about for a lot of years. So we're hopeful we can get those two things done, but obviously the governor has given us a list of demands which we still see as a bit unreasonable.
And what do you find unreasonable about them?
Well, obviously the issue that held up the borrowing and transportation bill at the end of the session was Southwest Light Rail, and he does have a requirement that he wants that funded. I'll remind folks that amendment that was added at the end of session had never been introduced as a bill, had never received a public hearing, and Southwest Light Rail itself has never received a hearing in the legislature. So there are two still outstanding lawsuits on Southwest Light Rail, and it's a highly controversial project. So that's probably the number one biggest stumbling block at this point, but also he wants about $100 million of ongoing spending, and another $180 million worth of borrowing. And the borrowing bill would have been the largest bonding bill ever passed in the state of Minnesota. So it's not like we're talking about something unreasonable here, or that it wasn't already a compromise bill. It most certainly was. So we hope the governor can appreciate that.
So what do you think the chances are now of getting a special session?
Well, I'm still optimistic. I'm hopeful that we can get it done. I think Minnesotans really want these two bills. There was, other stuff like local government aid for cities and for counties in the bill. And I think the governor, in fact, he told me in the meeting that he's been getting a lot of folks as he's been out on the road encouraging him to call a special session so we can pass those two bills. So we think it's important to do it, and I'm optimistic we'll get there.
Okay. Now, it does seem like it's been awfully hard for you guys to make a deal this past session. What are the chances that when you get into the special session that this is going to get taken care of?
Well, obviously only the governor can call a special session, and governors, and once they call it, only the legislature can decide when it goes home. So the governor has the power until he calls it, and we have the power once he calls it. So usually a governor will only do that if there's some agreement on what issues will be passed and what time frame will be there. So I think we'll have to come to agreement before he's going to do anything. And frankly, I worry about that a little bit in that it cuts the members of the legislature out of the process and leaves the negotiations up to just a small number of people. So, I'm nervous about that, but I think I'm still hopeful if we stay close to the bills we passed at the end of session that we can get it done.
The way things stand, if for some reason there was not a special session, wouldn't this be a blow for House Republicans as they go back to their districts to go ahead.
I think it would probably be a blow for everybody. That the money that was in the end of session is ugly sometimes, and this wasn't probably even in the top 10 ugliest end of sessions. But the one good thing about the end of session is it forces people to come together and compromise. And the bills that you see passed on the last day of session very often have large, broad, bipartisan vote totals from both sides of the aisle, and that's what we saw this time. People really want these bills, and I think what we're seeing as we're talking to people is that folks are kind of blaming the Senate Democrats for trying to add an amendment in the last few minutes of session on Southwest Light Rail. And I think folks are blaming the governor on the tax bill for vetoing that when it really wasn't necessary. And yes, there was an error in the bill, but we had an error in last year's tax bill. It's not uncommon. And we handled it the way we always do, through a letter of legislative intent. And it was a bigger error in last year's tax bill. It had to do with the Destination Medical Center down in Rochester. And when we came back into session, we fixed that error, and all was well with the world again. And that's how we could have fixed this one. But we think the governor obviously wanted to tie up that bill in negotiations on the other stuff, thinking that we really want the tax relief. And he had promised not to do that. So I think he's taking the blame right now for the tax bill.
But still, the only major bill to get done this session was the spending bill. Is that what Republicans want to run on, that you spent more money?
No, but, at least for Republicans in the House, we can say that we passed a tax relief bill with, 89% of the legislature agreeing with us that it was a good tax bill. We sent it to the Senate. We passed the borrowing and transportation bill, largest bonding bill ever. And the only reason we support a bill that big is because it had so much infrastructure and road and bridge money in it, and we sent it to the Senate. We did our job, and I'm not trying to blame folks here, but we have to all work together, and Democrats didn't follow through in the Senate, and folks out in the state see that.
When you talking about transportation and taxes, why not just give metro counties the authority to raise sale taxes for transit if they want? Then it's the county's decision, not the legislature's.
Well, it creates a bit of a turf war amongst our metro members. We heard this week that Dakota County has given notice that they want to opt out of CTIB, which is the County Transit Improvement Board. These funding mechanisms for transit are highly controversial. We know that Anoka County probably wants to get out as well. They don't like the way that they're being funded right now. And we'd like to see, and frankly have to see, real reforms to both Met Council and CTIB before we would put an additional amount of money in. And the amount of money that was talked about really would have been like a 240% increase in what we spend on transit. That's a huge number. And I think folks need to show that there is a plan and that sort of money is needed, but we also need to trust the mechanisms and trust that there's enough oversight and that we're not duplicating efforts to make sure that the money is spent effectively and efficiently. And I think that level of confidence is not there.
Representative Daudt, while I've got you here, I've got to ask, you told a Fargo radio station recently that you thought Donald Trump at the top of the ticket would help your Republican legislative candidates in rural districts. Do you still feel that way?
I was simply referring to the fact that we have polled in our rural districts and Donald Trump is ahead of Hillary Clinton out there. I think, unfortunately, right now what we have, and it's the reality on both sides, we have two candidates who are unpopular with the electorate. And I think that also lets us or shows that there's a sentiment that folks aren't happy with the direction things are going in the country right now. And frankly, I think for us that probably helps us because we are the check and balance to make sure that there is balance in the state of Minnesota, at least us in our majority in the House. So people seem to appreciate the fact that there has been a check and a balance, and it forces, by having Republicans in the House, it forces Democrats to have to compromise, and frankly, I think it comes up with a better product.
Will you endorse Trump?
I'm really focused on what we're doing in the state of Minnesota. Obviously, I'd like to see us get these two bills passed, and I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to what's going on at the federal level. But my focus is right here on my team and in the House and making sure that we're taking care of and solving the problems that Minnesotans care about.
So that's a yes or a no?
I'm focused on Minnesotans and issues that they care about.
Kurt Daudt, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. That was Republican Kurt Daudt, Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives.